Ladies and gentlemen, get the book Dr. Joshua Bowen wrote, The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. It is extremely full of knowledge and information for anyone, as well as join the Patreon. There's hundreds of videos that have been not released to the internet. You can ask questions and I will record them with these scholars in high definition. I do that all the time. You can also personal message me and you help the community grow. Thanks a lot. Dr. Joshua Bowen. I'm going to play the part of an apologist for a second so that our audience can understand where I'm coming from. And if you're an apologist watching this, you'll know exactly where I'm coming from because this is what you do. I hope I'm still manning them. Often I hear that the Bible came first. The Bible came first. Its stories are true. Usually if it came first, it's truer. So what you hear is people not arguing, well, the Bible came first. They get more complex. And skeptics and critical scholars and you name it, Old Testament scholars say, yeah, Genesis 1 through 11 is obviously using a Mesopotamian background. But the apologist will say something like this. Well, no, there's no literary evidence that it borrows from this book or that book in the Mesopotamian literature. We can't show the evidence that it actually is using that as its background. So they're not like arguing straightforward like a fundamentalist will. The Bible came first and we know it, which is one argument. They try to be more sophisticated and they say, well, it was in the air in the ancient Near East. This is just something they grab in the air. So how do you know Noah's story is not true? It's their way of sneaking in that the story is still true and that it's historically true is their point, that this actually happened. And so they'll somehow downplay the Mesopotamian background that it looks very much alike, but does it look very much alike? Because obviously it didn't borrow literarily from this other source. So Dr. Josh, I'm asking you, did Genesis 1 through 11 borrow, if that's a kind word I can use? Some people want to say, what do you call that?
Plagiarize.
Plagiarize, okay. But was it even a thing in that ancient world like that? Or were they just demythologizing something from the narrative? Anyway, I'll shut up. Just take us into this, please. I'm interested in hearing, how does the Mesopotamian background play a role for the Bible?
Huge question. Yeah, so lots of different ways. So, okay. There's no question, as far as scholars are concerned, biblical scholars, Assyriologists, there's no question that the biblical text is much later and it's borrowing from, it's utilizing either more directly or more subtly texts from Mesopotamia. There's actually a book, if I can spot it quickly.
I'm going to show you your bookshelf. He's got all sorts of books here.
Oh, come on. If I can't spot it in the next 5 seconds, I'll just let it go. But it's called, I can't find it quickly. But nonetheless, it's by edited by Zioni Zavit. And it's talking about like illusion. Ah, there it is. Okay. So subtle citation, allusion, and translation in the Hebrew Bible. Oh. And it's an edited volume.
Okay.
But it's a fantastic little book. It's not a huge read. But it talks about things like what are we talking about? How should we be thinking when we talk about intertextuality? So intertextuality is the way that two different textual traditions interact with one another. So the example that I always go to is something like Eminem in his song, I Love You Because You Remind Me of Me. I can't remember what the actual title of the song is, but he uses Joan Jett's I love rock and roll. And you can hear it. It's not subtle, right? He's utilizing the I don't know, the tune, I guess. But aspects of it, and he works it into his song. But what he's doing is he's utilizing it in such a way that he's creating something new.
Right.
Okay. This sort of thing obviously happens all over the place in modern music, modern art, but it also happened quite frequently in the ancient world. And I have an example that I could talk about at length, and I don't know if you want to do it in this video or do it in another video, but talking about how we can see intertextuality just in Akkadian literary texts between the story of Anzu, the Anzu bird, and Enuma Elish with the story of Marduk. But I can talk about that maybe in a separate video, or I can talk about it here.
You can talk about it wherever you want.
So maybe that's a good way to sort of lead into this, because I think it will explain what the Hebrew Bible is doing. So there's an Akkadian myth, comes from the second millennium, and it's called the Anzu myth. And in the Anzu myth, you have the main god Enlil, one of the main gods, Enlil. And he has this thing called the Tablet of Destinies. Such a cool name. And the Tablet of Destinies is essentially this tablet that whoever possesses it, the power sort of transfers to whoever has it. They can control the forces of nature. Essentially, they control reality, right? It's like the reality stone, I guess. And
I was going to say, where's Jack Black right now? Because that's a name he would put in something he does, yeah.
So in this story, this main god Enlil has the Tablet of Destinies, and there is a mythological bird creature called the Anzu bird. And the Anzu bird is good. He's not in the mythological tradition. He's not like a bad character, but in this story, he is set to guard the cella, like the room, whatever, of Enlil. So he's the guard. And Enlil in the story goes and he takes a bath, and so he has to take off all his royal garb and put down the Tablet of Destinies on his throne. And when he does, Anzu gets this bright idea, runs in, grabs Tablet of Destinies, and flies off into the mountains. Throws everything into chaos. So the gods go through this whole process. How are we going to get this Tablet of Destinies back from Anzu? Because not only is he a ferocious creature by himself, but now he has a Tablet of Destinies. Bad news. So they ask one god to go out, and that god says, oh my gosh, who can fight against him? I can't go out. He's too scared. They ask, and these are major deities, right?
And this is still the Assyrian myth, correct?
Yes.
Okay. The Akkadian, I apologize.
The Akkadian myth, yeah.
Is it Assyrian, Akkadian, same?
They're
in the same vein?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just depends on how you're using the word. But so the three different gods going to go out, and they get scared. They go back. Who can do this? So finally, they go to the god Ninurta. And Ninurta is like the young warrior god, right? And they convince him to go out and fight Anzu. So when he goes out, there's a fierce battle. I mean, and they're really mixing it up. And one of Ninurta's weapons is the bow and arrow. They're fighting. And he draws back the bow and shoots. And when the arrow comes toward Anzu, he holds up the Tablet of Destinies and says, arrow, go back to your thicket. And the sinew go back to wherever. In other words, the elements that make up the bow and the arrow go back to where you got them from their source. So the sinew to the animal, and the arrow to the thicket, and feathers to whatever. And so it repels the arrow because he controls reality. So Ninurta is flustered. What am I going to do? He's been defeated, right? So he has this mace, this weapon, and it talks. The mace is called Shar-Ur. And he says, Shar-Ur, go back to Ea, who is the Enki, Ea, the wise deity, the trickster deity, sort of. He's very clever. And Shar-Ur tells him what happened, and Ea thinks and says, I have a plan. So he tells the plan to the mace. The mace travels back and tells Ninurta what to do. So here's the plan. They start to fight. And when the Anzu bird gets tired and he lowers his wings, Ninurta cuts his pinions off from those long feathers. Mm-hmm. And Anzu is supposed to see these feathers sort of floating around, take the Tablet of Destinies, and call them back to him. When he does, Ninurta shoots an arrow, and because the fletching that's on the arrow is made of feathers, it would, when he calls the feathers to himself, it also calls the arrow to him. So it kills him.
That's clever.
So it's not by brute strength, by force, by power, whatever, that he wins. It's through being clever or trickery.
And one question I was going to ask you about that, as we get into the intertextual and stuff, I just want to say, it sounds to me that the idea of cleverness and even deceit isn't a bad thing necessarily.
Right.
It's actually a brilliant thing in the ancient world. It turns into something later in Christian mythology, of course, about Satan and the devil and him being the snake, which is not its original context. But we'll deal with that maybe in a different video. Yeah. But just getting into the Mesopotamian stuff and the Bible. But I just thought, if you were able to deceive people and you were very slick, you were wise, you were smart.
That's who Enki was, right? So Enki, just as a brief aside, the flood story, if you think about Atrahasis, Enlil is the wicked deity. He's called evil, doing an evil thing by sending the flood. And the way that Enki saves humanity, if you remember the story, all the gods are sworn. So just very quickly, Enlil devises different plans to decimate humanity. One is like a famine, one is a plague. And each time Enki goes to, Ea goes to the humans and says, like, here's how to beat this. The plague god or the famine god, like, go make a big offering to him, and and that'll like, make him not bring about this terrible thing and trick Enlil, essentially, like undermine Enlil's plan. And so Enlil makes all the gods swear that they won't go and inform, Utanapishtim, or Atrahasis, the flood hero, of what's going to happen, or anybody. And so Enki knows, or Ea knows, that he can't go tell Atrahasis the plan of Enlil to flood the world. So what does he do? Well, Atrahasis is standing by this reed fence. So Ea goes down and says, reed fence, hear my words, listen to me, build a boat. A flood's a-coming, reed fence. And so, say what? Right? So he gets around, he keeps his word, but in a clever way is able to trick, it's because it's deceitful.
Right.
And of course that preserves life, which is a whole trope, and pisses Enlil off, right? But it's because, but Enki's the hero, like one of the heroes. He preserves life. So, anyway, but that's the story of the Anzu bird. So at the end, Ninurta, his mace tells him to let Anzu's feathers blow into the wind back to the gods to announce your victory, right? That's important for later. Mm-hmm. He uses a battle net at one point. It's also an important thing to remember. But the story's a little confused. It's broken. This is clay tablet. So we don't know all the details of it, but it seems like at least for a while, Ninurta says, I'm not going to return the Tablet of Destinies. I'm going to keep it for myself.
So now another one.
So it looks like he does eventually return it in the story, but at least initially, he says he's not going to. Okay, so that's the Anzu myth. Now, the later text, the Enuma Elish, if you've heard of that story.
Mm-hmm. But you can recap anything you want. I think it's...
The Enuma Elish is like the Marduk. It's always called the creation story, the Akkadian creation story, or Mesopotamian creation story. Really what it is, it's the ascendancy of Marduk over the other deities, over the other gods, his supremacy. But it's a very clear reworking of the Anzu myth, the earlier Anzu myth. So in the story, you have Tiamat, who is the sea deity, and there's a whole thing that happens where ultimately Tiamat gets really pissed, and she's going to destroy the gods, and she sets up her consort, Kingu, and Kingu gets the Tablet of Destinies. Well, the same thing happens. You've got Kingu and these monsters and Tiamat, and the gods are fretting. What are we going to do? So they have a deity come out, big deity. Oh my gosh, can't do it. I'm scared. I run away. Can't do it. Another deity comes. Oh no, can't do it. 3 deities come out. Then Marduk volunteers. I'll go do it, but only if you make me the supreme deity. So you can see the parallels, right? You can see how it's reworking it, but the connections between the two. But it's the differences that are important. So when Marduk goes out, if you remember with Ninurta, there's a fierce battle and he loses. Then he has to use trickery and another fierce battle, and it's only through the trick that he wins. So it's not his power, it's his trickiness, right?
Yeah.
Marduk, in his approach, is so powerful, so fierce, that the text says even his approach, Kingu just falls out. The one that holds the Tablet of Destinies is beaten just by Marduk's approach. Right?
Yeah.
So you can see the development. He's so powerful. And the reader knows the story of the Anzu myth and goes, whoa, what? There's no fight even required. It's just his approach. Now, when we come to Genesis, you'll see how that's significant. But then he fights Tiamat. At one point, he uses a net for a water deity, which is a little weird. But Ninurta uses the net. At one point, it talks about when he kills Tiamat, cuts her veins open, and it says, let her blood go into the wind and blow back to the other deities to announce your victory. Well, blood doesn't really blow in the wind very well. But if you remember from the Anzu myth, let his feathers go up and blow back to the other gods. So it's pulling. There's an article written by, I think Michalowski wrote an article called Enuma Elish is like Anzu revivified. These aren't my ideas,
right?
Just so it's clear. But the point is, it's the things that are different. Marduk gives the Tablet of Death. Like there's no. He immediately establishes everything and sets everything in order. There are these names that are given to Ninurta at the end of the Anzu myth. There are 50 names given to Marduk at the end of the Enuma Elish, right? So the point is that there's intertextuality, very clear intertextuality between these two myths, but they're similar enough, they're structured similarly enough that the reader knows there's a connection, but it's the differences that count.
I love that.
Okay, so when you think about the biblical text, for example, Genesis 1 is a good example. I think I said example like 9 times just then.
It's okay.
The Enuma Elish, the way that it begins with a dependent clause. Enuma Elish, when on high, blah, 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 blah. Genesis 1 begins with a dependent clause.
Right.
When God began to create the heavens and the earth, right? You see the word tehom in Genesis 1. It's the same root of Tiamat, right? There's primordial water.
Chaos,
right? But the reader of Genesis 1 who knows the ancient Near Eastern, the Mesopotamian
This
background.
would be not even debated.
Yeah, because if you think about the Enuma Elish, what is the Enuma Elish? It's the text that's recited every year in Babylonia at the 𒀭Support festival.
Oh my gosh.
Every year. It's the New Year. So like that's the thing that gets recited. There's all kinds of cool stuff that happens at the 𒀭Support festival. We can talk about this some other time, but the king gets slapped. It's pretty cool. And actually, I have a video, just as a side note. If you go to Digital Hammurabi and type in 𝒀�Support, A-K-I-T-U, you'll see me getting slapped. Because I have Paige. What did I do? Oh, that's what it was. I talk about how the king gets slapped by the priest because he's supposed to be subservient, whatever. But at the end, I say of this short little video, I'm sitting there kind of close to the camera, and I say, "What a way to ring in the new year." And she hits me, and I say, "By getting your clock cleaned." Right? Ring in the new year, clock cleaned. Anyway.
It was a yearly ceremony.
That's right. But it's so if you want to see me get slapped. But the 𒀭Support festival, every year in Babylonia, like it's the thing that the king has to be there for it to go on. And if you think back to Nabonidus went for a 10-year hiatus out in Tama, so he's not there for 10 years. So guess what festival couldn't take place? The 𒀭Support. And that's a Marduk festival because it's the Enuma Elish, Marduk's main story that gets, he's the main deity of Babylonia. So the Marduk priesthood is pissed at Nabonidus because their festival can't go on. Anyway, it's all connected is the point. So, in other words, in captivity, the Israelites, those that are taken from Jerusalem, those taken from Judah, they're in captivity in Babylonia. They know the Enuma Elish.
Yeah, there's no doubt.
So, when you see these connections in Genesis 1, like their ears, boom, whoa, right? But it's the differences. You see, there's no battle in Genesis 1.
He speaks.
He speaks. Done. So when you think about like this intertextuality of Marduk just approaches. King Goose, done. The guy with the tablet of destinies, done. So the fact that Yahweh can speak, God can speak, and it's demythologizing, like the sea creatures, like the Tananim, they're like his playthings. Mm-hmm. They're subservient, created. It's setting them in the background with the message of our God is so good, our God is so bad, right? They're not even a thing. They're all in the background.
It's almost like Job, where he says, "Can you play with Leviathan like a bird?"
Yeah. That's right.
It's like, whoa.
And it's even more than that because it's like not even calling it Leviathan.
Right.
It's just backdropping it completely. So the idea that, we don't know which came, first of all, it's nonsense, right? We do know. We do know. The textual tradition for things like the flood story, much, much earlier than you see in the biblical text. I mean, Israel's not even, anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's more than that. It's more than which one came first. Because if you're asking the question, which one came first, you're trying to, you're not recognizing the beauty of the intertextuality. Because what the flood story is doing, for example, if you think about the Mesopotamian flood story, I said earlier, Enlil is evil. Because why does Enlil bring the flood? It's too noisy. Humans have overpopulated the earth, right? And they're just so noisy. And, I can't sleep. And so I'm going to bring plague. I'm going to bring, famine. I'm going to bring a flood. I'm going to decimate the people. And ultimately, at the end, he has like this demon that snatches children out. And that the point of it is to keep the human population down. So he ultimately does get his way. But he's called evil for doing this thing to humanity, right? All the gods are gnawing at they're hungry, right? Because they need humanity to feed them. When you get to Genesis 6 through 9, Do you see Yahweh as evil? Do you see Yahweh as capricious?
No, mankind is.
That's right. The text goes out of its way to not only say mankind, Yahweh is not evil, but it was the only option he had. This is why knowing the story, the narrative, is so important, because Yahweh, the text says, first of all, it talks about this, plugs in this story about, the angels, coming and having sex with, the humans and all the ramifications of that with Enoch later and whatever. But then it says, all the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually.
Yep. Desperately wicked.
Desperately wicked, right? And so God's grieved at his heart that he made mankind. And so he has to do it. He has to. But he, not some tricky Ea, not some other deity behind his back. No, he says, I'm going to save this righteous Noah and his family. Now I'm not being fooled. This is my plan, and I'm going to start over. So it's, again, the ears or the eyes, whatever, of the consumer of this text.
They're going to see Yahweh looks so much better.
Exactly. They see the similarities.
And they just make it better.
They can draw on this. I see what you're doing here. In the same way that if I say, Big Josh, if you know that song, Big John, right? Every morning at the mine, you could see him arrive. He stood 6'6" and weighed 245, kind of broad at the shoulder, narrow at the hip. But everybody knew you didn't give no lip to Big Josh.
Okay.
Well, you know that song, you hear that song, you're like, yeah, and I'm doing something different with it. I'm building myself up.
Right.
That was the first thing that came to mind. I'm sorry, everybody. But you can see, so you catch it. All right, I'm with him. Oh, there's the difference. That's what he's emphasizing. And that's what we have to do with something like the primeval history is, and tomorrow, which by the time people view this, it will already be done. Bruce Wells is coming on our channel, the ancient Near Eastern law specialist. Yes. But he's coming on to talk about his new research that he's doing, and that is showing the Garden of Eden story in its Mesopotamian background, in its context. And he had a presentation that he sent me and Megan a paper that we could read through, and it's brilliant. Brilliant. It's going to be so good. Go check it out. Bruce Wells.
But Digital Hammurabi, you got to go check him out. Dr. Josh, we're not done. There's so much more here. Thank you.